Welcome everyone to the show. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host and producer. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today's episode, The Victim Triangle, is actually a repurposed episode that I did in 2015 with Lynne Forrest. When I work with clients or do presentations, I often refer to many of the episodes that I've done over the years as teaching tools. Rather than me explain something, I want you to go back and listen to the conversation and learn it, and then come back to the table so we can move forward in whatever we're working on and whatever problems we're trying to solve. I have referred to these episodes so many times and realized that I never repurposed them. When I started out with Fit to Love, it was a 6-day-a-week show. I then repurposed it into what was supposed to be 6 new shows. But that 6th show, which would have been called The Emotional Side of Wellness, and it would have had all of my repurposed Thoughtful Thursdays, never made it. I never put it out there. So I really never used these episodes again. And so for those of you who've been listening to Fit to Love for a while, these are repurposed episodes. For everybody else, these are brand new to you and you've probably never heard them before unless you've worked with me. I wanted to bring the victim triangle conversation, the three faces of victim, things about betrayal. I feel like it's a really needed conversation right now. So for the next few weeks, I'm going to be repurposing 4 episodes that I did with Lynne Forrest on the victim triangle. I talk about linking you to her article that she wrote 20 years ago that got so much play and so much attention. It's actually here in the show notes. So if you want to jump down and read The Faces of Victim, it's a very significant document. It is life-changing. It definitely gave me a whole new perspective about family dramas, about dynamics between people, and I refer to it often. And you'll hear the evolution of me. And we're going back 5 and 6 years now to when I recorded this with Lynne. I was very excited. You'll hear the story, but I just wanted to let you know that, because it was 5 years ago at this point, my microphone's fine. Lynne was not using one, so it's going through her computer mic, but you get used to it. It's not bad. And hopefully, you'll hear this differently. Every time I do a live event, I want to cover these topics, but because I'm not really an expert in them, I know about them, I understand them, but because I haven't studied them or ever presented them, I just refer everybody back to these episodes. So I thought, why not pull them forward and give them to you now, here, at a time where I think it's really important to continue having this conversation and to review these episodes. I will also let you know that I have opened up the application process for the Empowerment Strategist Certification Beta Program. I am looking for 6 people, but now I'm looking for 5. We do have one who is now enrolled into the beta program to help me sort of work out the kinks, if you will. They'll be the first people who will be certified as empowerment strategists moving forward, and I'm super excited to now open up the door, if you will, to anyone else who is a coach or wants to be a coach or who wants to be involved in the kind of work that I'm doing. You want to do what I'm doing. You want to add it to the repertoire, but you can go to jjflazanes.com/cert. CERT, like certification, and fill out the application and jump on a call. I will start working with my 6 beta certification applicants and registrants in April. So it's going to be open until I fill it, basically. So if you're interested, I absolutely invite you to fill out the application and let's jump on a call and see where you are in the process. But I'm very excited and I can't wait to have you learn more about what's going on and doing all the work. And I will say that the beta program, as well as when I finalize this, will also be more of a you're doing the work on you first, because we have to experience it before we can help others do it. We have to understand it at a very deep personal level, I believe, before we can be of service to see it in somebody else. So it is kind of a therapeutic program, a therapeutic life coaching program for the people going through it, and then learning how to teach it and work with others. So again, jjflazanes.com/cert. And today's show is the first of 4. And I hope you enjoy the content. I'd love to invite you into the Inner Circle membership to talk about it if you're not already in there. One last announcement, just because I know someone's going to come back to me later and say I didn't know, the price for the Inner Circle membership, $9.99, is going up to $14.99 March 1st. Anyone getting in before that will be grandfathered in at that price, and I'm going to be adding monthly meditations. So monthly guided meditations on the Inner Circle membership podcast from me, from Michael Neely, from other people. I'm going to add these meditations in so you always have a new meditation to work with every month. I asked the group if they were interested. I got a lot of yeses, and so it's official. I'm going to be adding guided meditations monthly into the Inner Circle podcast. So if you're interested in securing your $9.99 a month price, go to jjflazanes.com/inner circle. Enjoy today's show. I am very excited about our guest today. I've been using her work and sharing her work with others for the last year. Lynne Forrest is a reality guide and personal growth mentor. Lynne was educated through a lifetime of studying and observing metaphysical life principles taught to her early in life and learning how to apply those principles to her own life in positive ways. She's been sharing her findings with others and watching their lives transform since the 70s and has supported herself and her family through a private practice which was founded on those principles in 1985. Lynne came up through the ranks of experiential learning rather than the more traditional academic route. She started out in the mental health field in the early 70s, hired and trained by an HMO in social work and mental health. She has been in the field of personal growth ever since, moving to the addictions field in the early 80s, where she was one of the pioneers for codependency and family of origin work in Chattanooga, Tennessee. As a perpetual student of life and consciousness, Lynne has devoted her career to studying with masters of various disciplines: family dynamics, Jungian principles, dreams and shadow work, psychodrama and energy, as well as the laws of manifestation, body-oriented practices such as yoga, physical unwinding, and qigong are some of the approaches Lynne applies to her work with others. Welcome to the show, Lynne.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, JJ. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm very excited that you agreed to be on the show because I think your work is so important. Lynne is going to be with us for 3 shows. So if you get a taste of something we're talking about today and you know this is an area in which you need to work on or want to heal, please make sure to check back because we are going to be doing 3 different shows with Lynne. She has granted us that time and I really appreciate that. Lynne, why don't you start telling us a little bit about the work that you do specifically and how you got into it in terms of your own personal life?
Well, when I think about the work, I think about it in phases and stages. But let me just tell you about the most recent transition, which happened for me about, 2006. And that morning, I woke up having become progressively ill from diagnosis of a serious illness, chronic illness, and just had been continuing to go downhill. And even though I had studied these principles that I teach today for years and been accruing information and going and experiencing the masters and teachers around the world that I felt moved to go and be with, it wasn't until that morning when I got up and went into my meditation feeling so rough that I was given really the call. And basically, it came in the form of an inner question that basically said, are you willing to live the principles and the tools that you've been gathering to teach others? Because if they are for you, they're for your healing. And if you will use them, if you will meet me here every morning, and this is that inner presence coming through, if you will do that, then and use these tools and principles you've been gathering, then you can experience the true healing that they offer. And so I made that commitment that day, and I can count on both hands the times I've missed a daily practice since then, which consists of it's not about an exercise program. Although some people would say, oh, you get up and do yoga every day, or you get up and do qigong, or you whatever. For me, it is where I go to meet with my boss. It's my meeting in the morning. It's where I get my go-to orders for the day. And so it's a very vital part of my life. And where it had been up until that point, it had been something I should do. It had been a duty or an obligation or, if you're going to teach this stuff, you should at least know how to do it kind of mentality. But there was always a sort of, I don't have time, or it's too hard, or is it over yet? Or I've been here for 10 minutes. Okay, that's enough. It became something totally different. It became, and still is to this day, a living, breathing exchange between myself, my deepest essence being, and that which sources me, that I call source. And from that, there has come a complete rejuvenation on so many levels, energetically mostly. And the realization and the coming together of the things that I had picked up piecemeal over the years, through starting in childhood with having parents who were very different from one another. They were contrast of one another, really. My father, who was very dysfunctional, caught up in an addictive lifestyle. He was addicted to alcohol and rage, and had lived an abusive cycle his whole life. An only child who had been well educated, and the two of them were sort of a mismatch from the beginning, but they were perfect in terms of using the other one. That was sort of how they worked together. Was he would go get drunk and she would run after him and try to save him. And so, but she also was an editor for a publishing company, so she would bring me books. And from the age of 7 and 8, I started reading about the Rosicrucians and the Theosophists and the metaphysics of the universe. I began to, and was intensely interested in all that, began to study the masters of the Far East. So by the time I was 12, I could tell you all about reincarnation and reading auras and all these things that was way beyond my time or the time of that era. My mother was she was New Age before the phrase was even coined, kind of thing. And so I had these two contrasting energies, that one showing me what it's like to live out of the victim story, my father and his family and the drama there, and then my mother, who was involved in the drama, but also had this other part of her that she cultivated and recognized in me and cultivated, being sensitive to another self, another opportunity to recognize that we're more than just a body. And so that started very, very young. And so I went through my own experience with addictions and all of that, following the path of my father, only to then come into sobriety in 1980, and then found the 12-step program, and then became very much a part of working in the therapeutic treatment field. And then, of course, just began to evolve my own recovery, and slowly the spiritual principles began. It was like the burning question for me has been, well, all of those spiritual principles, they're great. I love them. They sound good, but how do you apply them on the ground? How do you use them practically? That's been my life work. And I've come up with a set of tools, a process that I call the reality formula. And it's based on a formula. The formula is this: when we believe what we think, we automatically feel and act as if what we believe is true. And when we believe it, we will act in ways that will prompt even others to give us the evidence that we're seeking unconsciously. We all do this. This is the way the human mind works. It's the reality formula is a fact of life. And we either do it unconsciously and thereby unconsciously create an unhappy story that we then live out and prove to ourselves on the victim triangle, that triangle that was diagrammed by Dr. Stephen Cartman in the 70s. That was when I first came across it and began to use it as a tool in my work with other people and in my own life, of recognizing that not only is there a victim consciousness, but that there are different stops or roles that we play in victim consciousness, and developing that. And then the reality formula then describing not only what the mind does, but also how to use that very same formula to unwind our unhappy story, to begin to the work of getting off the triangle.
And that's how I found you. Actually, there was a therapist who's a client of mine, and I mentioned, because one of my triggers maybe for a while was that I just rebel against the whole idea of being a victim. I've always thought this doesn't feel good. I feel powerless, and then I find a way out of it to gain my power back. And I often hear so many people give their power away and come from being a victim, that life happens to them and that they have no responsibility in it. And how could that person do that to me? And so she mentioned your work, and I went to your site and saw your write-up and your videos about the victim triangle. And that's really what this show is about today, introducing that victim triangle and the different parts of it. And do we start and stay at one part? Because I know I identify with one more than the others, but I can see that I could be all all of them. So could you tell us a little bit about, I know that you didn't create the victim triangle, but if you could explain it and talk about your work with it?
Yes, the victim triangle is called the drama triangle by Dr. Cartman, who is really, that's what he does. He does relational diagrams, and he diagrammed that triangle as sort of the way we move around anytime we get involved in an unhappy drama. And I picked up that tool back then, and because I was working in the field with clients, individuals, groups, and families, I began to teach it and delve into it more and more deeply. I think that's how it is that I became known as or recognized as an authority on it, because I probably published on the web one of the first major write-ups of what the victim triangle is and all the ins and outs of it in that article, Faces of Victim, on my webpage. That's the cleaned up, edited version of that original copy I put out some 15 years ago. So it helps when we think about the victim triangle, as I call it, because the reason it's called the victim triangle is because no matter where you start out on that three-position triangle, there are three roles. No matter which one you start out in, we move around from there, and we sooner or later end up in victim. And let's define what victim is. Victim consciousness is a state of being that says that my well-being is dependent on what's happening outside of me. That is, or how they won't let me, or how I can't because there's something out there keeping me from standing in the door of blocking me from the life I want to live and keeping me from happiness. And as soon as I attribute blame to something outside of me as being the cause of my unhappiness, I have officially entered victim consciousness. And you were talking about not wanting to see ourselves as a victim, that those of us who don't want to see ourselves as that's a very common place for one of the roles on the triangle. There are three. And one of them is the victim, which is that part of us that when we come into the triangle, we always come onto the triangle through the victim doorway. The victim is that part of us that is in collapse, that feels done in by, at the mercy of, helpless over, lives in a state of mind that says, I can't. I need somebody who can, because I can't. I don't have what it takes. I need you to save me, help me, do for me. And so that's the initial place all of us enter the triangle from. Now, it's where we go from there. Some of us, it's a defense strategy. These roles on the triangle are defense strategies. It's sort of like, I don't believe I can take care of me, but I know that if I'm helpless enough, you will take care of me. So actually, we have what I call professional victims, those people who literally get their needs taken care of. They make their way in the world or through life by getting other people to take care of them. And they may not even be conscious of it. It's such a part of their makeup. Some of them are, actually. They will sort of play the part because they're coming from a core belief that says, I can't take care of me. So you have a person who's deeply entrenched in that personality style, that defense style. And what are they going to attract? Well, they're going to attract the second role on the triangle, which is what's called the rescuer. And the rescuer is that mentality that does not see itself as a victim. No, victims are the people we help as rescuers. We're here to take care of those who need us, because we're operating, when we're in rescuer, we operate from a premise that says, my needs don't count. Yours are more important. And so I'm going to take care of you because you're what's important, and sacrifice me because I'm not important, in the hopes that I will find a sense of validation and importance through that. So that's the kind of the core belief behind rescuers. As rescuers, we tend to undermine ourselves and believe that the only way that I can really verify, reinforce my right to be here, substantiate it really, is by being that which is helping others, saving them from whatever it is we think they need to be saved from. And so this match between the rescuer and the victim, the help, is a match made in hell, I like to say, because it's like they're looking for one another in life. But energetically, it's never going to work out well because a helpless baby victim really believes in their helplessness, and a rescuer really believes that they can help, that by helping the victim, that they will be appreciated and acknowledged for all they give. But that's not what happens. Victims get a crick in their neck from always looking up. They get tired. They get resentful. They want you to save them, but on the other hand, who do you think you are? And so there's that mentality. And then the third position, the third face on the victim triangle, is the persecutor. So the persecutor is the face on the triangle who also is operating out of a core belief. And the core belief of the persecutor is that the world is dangerous, that I've got to get you before you get me. And that they look at and they see, persecutors see attack everywhere they look. They don't believe that you are on their team. They have a difficult time believing, frankly, that they deserve to have anyone on their team because they believe in their own badness. And they, on some level, expect to be unacceptable and rejected. And that's as a personality. So as a defense, so we experience the triangle in two ways, both as a defense strategy and as what becomes a personality. When we become so identified with a role on the triangle that we literally take it on as who we are, we become the role. And then then it's what we call a starting gate position. We become starting gate rescuers, starting gate victims, starting gate persecutors, because the defense style best operates or best works for our particular adaptation of a belief about who we are in relation to the world. And so we both move around the triangle through all those positions, taking on the defenses at different times, and we also, some of us, take on the personality style of that particular position, and it becomes the way who we identify as who we are. And so that's basically how we move around the triangle.
On our next show, we're going to talk about in more depth victim, rescuer, and persecutor and that starting gate position. When I watched one of your videos and went through the information, it literally explained the family drama that I was experiencing. And I haven't talked about that on this show, obviously because it's extremely personal and I don't know who's listening. But I'm bringing it up now and I'm putting it out there now for the reason that it really explained the dynamics. And I really appreciated sort of the validation that I got from understanding, sort of like you talk about the starting gate positions or the roles that people play, and then the dynamics that gets created out of that based on that belief. So I'm looking forward to the next show already to talk a little bit more about the victim, rescuer, and persecutor, and when you where's the starting gate position and how to heal that. So I have one more question about sort of just that overview about the concept of the victim triangle. Does being on the triangle mean that somebody did something wrong, or was this based on modeling, or is this out of like you said, it's a defensiveness, but is it sort of from our caveman? Is it instinctual, or is it learned behavior or modeling?
It is inherent in human beings, I believe. And that what I mean is when I look around, because of the outreach of my messages to the world, I have followers all around the world. And so I've been able to recognize and see that this is not just a Western culture problem. It's not that it is worldwide. It is a human mind dilemma. And frankly, we all of us move in and out of victim consciousness throughout the day, every day. It's not a matter of whether or not we get on the triangle. Because we get on the triangle not only with others, we get on the triangle with ourselves. You know, it's sort of like, okay, the bully in me starts beating me up because I didn't make the right move or decision, or my presentations didn't come across the way I thought it should have. And so I'm in there and I'm just giving myself, a hard time, just coming down on myself and feeling. And then there's this part of me that goes into victim that says, oh, well, I just don't know if I can do any better. I don't even know if it's worth it. I can't do this. I'm a failure. And so I go into that place. And then there's the rescuer pipes and it says, oh, it's not that big a deal. Let's go watch TV. Let's go get a drink. Let's go. And then does something to sort of rescue us out of them. So we do this triangle and any time there's an unhappy story running. So we move in and out of it. And frankly, JJ, I think it's by design. I think that we're designed because I believe that planet Earth is where we come to flesh out our belief systems. I think it is a plane of density, meaning that it's energetically speaking. And what I mean by density is that it takes density, dense energy to create form. And we come here, and what is form? It is what we know in quantum physics and in neuroscience is that thoughts are electromagnetic, and they pull to us the energy that actually creates in our peripheral vision, where I can see it in front of me and interact with it, whatever it is we're believing. So if I believe that the world is dangerous, I will find myself walking a path that's extremely dangerous. I will prove it to myself. And I need to do that. Why do I need to do that? Because how else am I going to see that I'm living out of a mentality that sets me up for danger? Except to go through it, except to experience it, except to be able to flesh it out so that I can see, interact, and experience the consequences of that belief system. So then we stop bemoaning the victim triangle. We stop seeing it as a problem. We stop blaming ourselves or others, and we began to use it as the refinement tool that it really comes to offer us.
I couldn't agree more. This show, we have a Freedom Friday show, which is about spirituality, and law of attraction is my number one message and teaching for people about attracting and becoming, and about using contrast like we're talking about right now, and labels. For instance, I use astrology, we talk about numerology, and none of it is to put people in a box. It's to give you information from which to make decisions and to know what it is you're attracting, to know what it is you're believing, and to then evaluate if that's working for you or if it's not, and how you can change it and shift it into getting more of what it is that you do want. So I'm absolutely in agreement with the attraction part of the metaphysics of all of this. And so I'm thinking about our listeners who are listening, and maybe they've identified themselves as being on the victim triangle, or they related to some of the story that you had about your parents and the dynamics there. And maybe they're children of alcoholics or someone who's too controlling, and they have some of the behaviors and the thought processes and the feelings that you've mentioned. I'd love you to give some tools, if you can, if there are things that people can start doing right now. Of course, it's always an option to reach out and work with Lynne and see how you can work with her to uncover and heal some of these things and to transform them. But we'd like to give you a little bit of information that you can work with right now and start to utilize in your life. Okay, Lynne, so what can I do? What can I do if I've identified myself with this and I know that I might want to reach out and do some more work, but right now, in the next 10 hours, what steps can I take to start to move through this a little bit more?
Well, the first thing I would recommend is that people go to my website, which is lynneforrest.com, and that's Lynne spelled with an E on the N and 2 R's in Forrest, and read Faces of Victim so that you really give yourself a chance to read that whole article. And I don't know, 13, 15 pages. It's a well fleshed out article, but it will really give you the information to help you, each of you, determine where you are on the triangle. And that's observation and consciousness are the first. I mean, that alone changes everything. Just to become aware, because we teach this model for for kids. We've developed a model. We're actually right now putting together a toolkit for schools and begun to have schools and orphanages reach out to us to bring this model in. So we've been doing that over the past year. We've worked with several special needs schools and orphanages on the border in Mexico, taking this model to kids from the ages of 4 up. And it is amazing to watch how the children grab a hold of this, how it is they can befriend reality by accepting life on its own terms and beginning to make peace with it. And that they do that by recognizing that they can choose what they believe. See, most of us don't even know that. We think we have to believe it because we thought it, and if we thought it, it must be true, right? So this is the mindset most of us are operating out of. So just to learn that we can question our thoughts and begin to recognize what are the thoughts that go with me on the triangle and me in this role on the triangle. And when I believe that, look at the reality formula. When I believe what I think, how do I feel and how do I act and what does that create in my life? What does it attract? These are the questions we begin to ask ourselves. We begin to cultivate what I call an observer mind, as opposed to the victim consciousness. We now have a reality consciousness, a consciousness that's based on seeing reality for what's happening, minus our story about what that means. In other words, it is not what people do or say, but what we do in our own minds with what they do or say that determines whether or not we're in victim consciousness. We can be true victims of disaster, trauma, illness, abuse, and that be reality, and never go into victim consciousness. We do that by saying, okay, this happened. What can I learn from it? How can I grow from it? How is this something, what was it reflecting to me about my own belief system? How is it showing me about my relationship with me? You see, there's no victim involved in that. And then what happens is that happening, no matter how traumatic it was, it becomes fertilizer for the mind. It becomes fertilizer for planting new seed thoughts. And so that's sort of in a nutshell the process as we begin to step into observer mind. And on my website, while you're there, sign up and to receive the weekly messages. They are free of charge. This is how I've been able to contact the worldwide community with quite a large readership at this point, and that's been out there for about 4 or 5 years. I've had people who've never met me, never even read my book. And by the way, there is my book, Beyond Victim Consciousness, that's available that describes this process on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles, either one, carry it. But that's what alerted me when I began to get this mail from people all over the world, India, Africa, Australia, the UK, Europe, countries I never even heard of, who are telling me that these messages in and of themselves have helped them to change their worldview and therefore brought them more peace. And so it's our job is to shift the way we see, not change the way the world is. It's making peace with life, and that's what changes the world, believe it or not. The more we push against something, the more it pushes back. The bigger it gets, the stronger it gets. And that's just how that works. We just put out last week that when you go to my webpage, go to my blog page, and you'll read the write-up on it. It's Reality Formula Steps to Building New Neural Pathways. So this is teaching. It actually gives you a phone app that you can download on your iPhone or your Android to build new neural pathways for peace. So those are some of the suggestions that I would make to listeners today.
Excellent. And I will have both links to that blog post and to your website. I'd love to hear from all of you out there. And if you like today's show, we're going to go even deeper in 2 more shows with this topic. And the next one is going to be a little bit more in-depth about victim, rescuer, and persecutor. Lynne, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, JJ.